Well, howdy, friends. Brian Flechsig of Mad River Outfitters and the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools, and we've got a very special episode. Our very, very good friend of mine and Mad River Outfitters, and all of yours, Mr. Kelly Galloup. Kelly.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yep.
Is your store or mine? Oh, yeah, it's your store.
Well,
Thank you for having me here.
sometimes it gets confusing.
Yes.
It seems like I spend part of my life at the Slide Inn, and I think I've almost taken over Bill Devane's chair there at times.
It's a good chair to take.
Yeah, for at least a week a year or a little bit more. But anyhow, I wanted to take advantage of you being here. First and foremost, thank you again for this book, Monor Streamers for Trophy Trout. I know
I've an OG. Haven't seen a hardcover in a long time.
Yeah. You might have even autographed it to me. This book, ad nauseum, our customers, our viewers have heard me talk about this book and how it changed my life, how it changed the life of so many. But I was reading a book recently called Rivers of Sand by Josh Greenberg. You know Josh.
Sure.
And Josh actually went as far as to refer to our industry and our fishing lives as pre-book and post-book. And he was referring to this.
Yeah.
And that really kind of struck me. And again, it made me realize what an impact this book had on our industry. And not only from a fishing standpoint, and from a practical standpoint. But let's talk about fly shops. You know, I started in this business in 1989, and so I saw this happen. But you created an industry within an industry from this book. There were not, I mean, back when I was working at Streamset Outfitters, or even in the first 5 or 6 years of Mad River Outfitters, our streamer selection was... Yeah, we had woolly buggers,
Muddler minnow.
We had a muddler minnow. We had a gray ghost, black nose dace, Mickey Finn.
Big.
Yeah, and they were all that big. And you created an industry within an industry, not only with the flies. Now there's an entire side of an entire fly bin in my shop, not even to mention your shop, for crying out loud. That's all Kelly Galloup flies, all articulated stuff that nobody ever dreamed of when I first started in this business. And not only that, you've revolutionized sinking lines. You've taught us all about leaders, articulated flies. We're selling these beads now, and not just for pegging fish in Alaska. They're for tying flies. So thank you again, friend to friend and industry to industry. This book changed so much, and it'll change so much for you that haven't read this book. But anyhow, I get this question a lot, which is what I'm leading up to. Anyhow, along comes, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, don't remember.
Monor Streamers for Trophy Trout 2. Also an excellent book, and I think a must-read. And I mean, my answer is always the same. A lot of people ask, which one should they start with? Well, where should you start? You should start at the beginning. But tell us a little bit about maybe the differences and what this book does that this one doesn't, if that's possible.
Oh, yeah, real easy. I mean, I get asked, obviously, the same question. And the first and foremost, in this book, when Russ and I were first playing, Russ was very instrumental.
Russ Madden.
Yeah. Sorry. It's like...
Not everybody's from Michigan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Russ and I, Bob and I were working on this stuff too, but more so in the fly design, that was very much Russ and I. And we realized very early on that the fish were eating the head of these flies. Because we started out with these giant flies. They were this long, the hook, not the fly. The hook's this long, the fly. And a lot of people thought we started the articulated stuff to make the fly bigger. Quite the contrary, we did not. We actually made the fly smaller when we started using articulated flies, because a lot of those flies were 7 inches long, because they were 14X Carrie Stevens trolling hooks.
Right.
Giant flies, pushing water and doing all the stuff we wanted them to do, but they'd always eat the head and we weren't hooking up. And so we changed these things and actually tried to stop this book to put them in, and they wouldn't do it. Which, in hindsight, was good for me because I got to write the other one. And so the other book, Monor Streamers 2, brought much more in the flies in design because we had 15 years more knowledge about it and experimentation with it. So you get the flies, and then our buddy Glenn Blackwood, who's, owns a shop in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he's a book guy like you. He was very disappointed there wasn't any walk talk in there, walk fishing, so that we didn't. You just need to put something about fishing from shore and different things like that. Or just not everybody has a boat. Well, nowadays it seems like everybody does have a boat.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, and there was just, hopefully you don't write a book and just stop and don't learn anything. And, so then you got 15 more years of experimentation, watching people fish, interactions with people like you who read it and said, what do you think of this? Have you thought of that? If you ever do this, you ever do that? From a standpoint of just basics, one's great. And 2 is kind of a reiteration of 1, but then expanding on the things that have changed. And that I wouldn't say that a lot changed, but lines changed, rods changed. We didn't have rods dedicated to this back then, and we didn't have lines. I mean, we did. I had that first line with Jim Teeny, but that was a level sink, right? That was just what it was. And then we progressed with the lines, and leaders started changing a little bit, and not a lot. That kind of stayed close, but the layup, or not the layup, but the setup of how we did it's a little different. But so it's just a continuation from 1. I mean, the guts of this whole thing pretty much is all in 1, and then it's just elaborating a little bit further on, and particularly the flies. I mean, there's no articulate flies in there. A lot of people don't realize that, because as that book came out, and it was very successful right out of the gate, even though the book came out, it took months. We had articulated flies because we especially in that early days, every time Russ would do one, I'd try to outdo him and blah, blah, blah. And so the flies were developing very quickly. It was so fun to watch these things come up, and just, God, it was just so different. I was telling somebody the other day, the first time I saw, there was 2 flies. One was the first time I saw a zoo cougar in a tree. I'm like, damn it, it's over, because we had it to ourselves. In that first 2 years when we were doing the experimentation, man, we owned it. And the number of fish, and that's, I think it was Blaine I was talking to, Chocolate, and I said, the number of fish and the size of the fish and the repetitive behavior of these giant fish, they'd never seen it. And it's not that, and people don't realize, in flies, they had not seen gear, because we fished a lot of fly water. So they hadn't seen Rapalas or big spinners, and all they'd seen were dry flies and maybe a Mickey fin or a 9.3 or whatever. So you got a fly this big. So here comes these big, flashy, articulated, water-moving flies. Man, we might as well have been throwing live bait. It was obscene.
Yeah.
But this book, of course, it goes to print, and it's got to go, and you got a couple months to get the book back. In the meantime, we've come up with about at least a dozen flies that, so people they aren't in this book, but they were seeing them at my shop. They weren't seeing them everywhere because there weren't a lot of shops that had them. They had the cougar, but they didn't have all of them.
Right.
And so this book, number 2, this one, as you can see right here on the cover, everything's articulated. Well, on this one, it's a butt monkey, Bob's butt monkey, and it's a single hook fly. These didn't even exist, and so it's mostly just a continuation. It's really what that is. This book is the 1 year after that hit press, but didn't have what we had in it.
Right.
And so,
well,
and not a lot changed other than
that's an amazing history of this, thinking that this is referred to as almost like, not too long after I started in the business, there was the pre-movie and post-movie with A River Runs Through It. And in those days, a river runs through it, catapulted fly fishing to the point where anybody and everybody could hang a shingle out and say they had a fly shop and be successful for a couple of years.
Yeah, about 2 years.
Yeah, and only a handful of us made it through, and now we've seen the ups and downs. But amazing to think that this book was so influential that people call it pre-book and post-book, and it still didn't have the stuff that we're actually selling.
Yeah.
That industry that you and Russ and others created. And you talk about Blaine. Blaine's kind of done the same thing. Mm-hmm. Blaine has created an entire industry now with shanks and brushes and stuff. That we have racks of stuff that did not exist before Blaine Chocolate brought it. So there's literally been two people that have created these industry microcosms within our industry, and you know this, but you've made Mad River Outfitters a lot of money over the years. Yeah, right.
We're going to dinner shortly, buddy.
Yeah, we are. But let's see. This book came out, and it was only 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I don't remember.
2019. So
there you go.
It was 5 years ago.
And I would think about that, and I'm gonna have to say thank you to Josh because I have the book. I don't remember reading that part, but I would say that it was much what Selective Trout Strategies did for the dry fly industry. It was much the same that I witnessed in the 70s, watching where we went from an Adams, where you go into bins and you'd see an Adams. And, I was telling Justin, the owner of Montana Fly, that in the old days, fly shops had flies like the Troutsman, my shop up north in Michigan. You had your own flies, right? Mm-hmm. You had your flies and an Adams, and a Cahill, and so, but your shop names, and then as it progressed, and right after that one happened, you saw all these tires coming along for dry flies, and it not to the same degree, but I mean it was like that, and then this book came out, and instead of having 4 streamers and kind of hidden somewhere in a cup, suddenly there's and again. What I like to think of is that post book, pre-post book, the post revolution was how many young tires that blew up and came out of nowhere. I just did a seminar a couple days ago at Michigan, and the number of 18 to 25-year-old tires that came to me and show me the fly and show me that fly and want to see this, and the same thing tomorrow night when we have our thing. You'll see these young guys and gals that are they're giddy about it, right? They're just kicking butt.
It's astronomical.
It's cool to see. Yeah. I mean, that's my favorite part of it. I mean, I obviously love the accolade. Thanks for doing that. To me, to see, because you think back when you started, our mantra was always, how do we get kids involved in this? Mm-hmm. Somebody under 60, and it's like, now that I'm really way past that, it's not as derogatory. It's not as derogatory as it used to sound. Right. but it's like there's all this freshness.
Mm-hmm.
There's all this, because it was a little stuffy in the dry fly world because a lot of, not that the older guys were detriment to it in any way, but it was just like the bug collecting and all this stuff that didn't really make necessary. You couldn't. There's no hatch. What do you do? Okay, well now what do you do? So now
you go home.
Now you've got this active way of fishing and youth, and so we have it, And so of course some of the old guys are now pissed off that there's too many people, but you got to have one or the other. And you get fresh people in this one. It's really cool.
And they still get. I think some people still get irritated. Some of those traditionalists, which there's still some of them around. Mm-hmm. They still get kind of irritated when I pull out a double or triple articulated fly and it's that long, and they literally think that I'm full of shit.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's just part of our industry. It's part of every industry in the world.
It is.
It doesn't matter what you do, somebody doesn't like it. Yeah. But again, to me, as far as knowing that the book helped people do something and bring the new, the younger crowd into the thing, that was really cool to me. But to answer the real question, I don't know. You know, for me, I say, you know, it'd be nice if you get this one, but if I was going to get one, I'd get two. Just if you're a tyer in particular. If you tie, this might be cool because you probably haven't seen all those old flies because they're kind of losing privilege in the bins because.
Well, I still use the Zoo Cougar.
Zoo Cougar and a woolly scope and a stack blind to me are still.
Yep.
If you. Not everybody fishes Michigan, but if you fish Michigan, if you don't have a tam woolly scope and you're leaving fish on the table, and it's a single hook fly, but and a cougar. I was just in Chile, and you know, I said, "You ever try a cougar? You ever fish yellow down here?" No. There's a weed bed out there, so watch this. I love that thing, but you know, this is a little bit. That's why it's Monor Streamers too.
Yeah.
And so, from the fly tying perspective, I tell everybody that I'd buy this one for the guts and just the everything. I'm going to say one's still just, you know, it's got everything in it, just doesn't have the flies.
I'd agree with that. The foundational, you know, for example, which way does a bait fish flee?
Yeah.
If he encounters a bird, I mean, that's the thing that changed that right there. I remember reading that, and I remember I think it was Christmas, somewhere around Christmas, because I think I went fishing on New Year's Day, and I was so inspired. You talk about lines. I was so inspired. I went downstairs and I tied a bunch of yellow flies. Because you talk about yellow, I've heard you talk about yellow ad nauseum. You put yellow on almost all of your flies. So I went downstairs and I tied a bunch of yellow flies. And of course I didn't have a fly line, so I took Cortland lead core.
Yeah.
I took Cortland lead core and I whipped loops in the end of it, and I looped it to my backing.
Perfect.
And I went to the stretch of water that we're going to fish tomorrow morning, as a matter of fact, and I caught a 24-inch brown. It was was at the time, let me think, it was not the biggest fish I'd caught on the Mad, but just at that time. But the biggest fish I ever caught on the Mad was on a Dahlberg diver.
Larry's my hero.
On a sinking tip. Yeah.
I still think Larry's the most. If anybody doesn't know who this guy is, you should pull your head up.
Yeah.
Because I think Larry was the most pure, best of all things that ever was. He kind of, you know, I don't know. He was a huge influence to me. Still is. I was actually talking to Willem yesterday.
Yeah.
And he fishes with Larry a lot. I says, you know,
yeah, I'd
do a lot of things to be able to get in that boat with.
Yeah.
I says, I'd sell out really easy if I could get in that boat.
No,
but a diver,
he's probably one of the most talented and educated and I think innovative anglers of our.
The most, if you ask me.
No question. There's nobody better. So anyhow, there you have it. Sorry to be so long-winded, but Kelly's in town. So,
and Kelly's long-winded.
Yeah, and if you stick around, after Kelly leaves, we're going to teach you the click trick. Okay, stay tuned.
Yeah, we don't want to do it right now.
No, you don't even have yours on. So you're safe. You're or not safe. No, you're not safe.
Fast forward for 5 minutes.
Yeah. So anyhow, the truth of the matter is, friends, I mean, they're books. They're not that expensive. You're going to benefit. This has got the foundation, the concepts, and it presents the facts. And then this takes it to 20 years later. You know, here it is 20 years later, and this has all of the articulated flies, which is where the world is today, especially when you factor in guys like Blaine Chocolate and everything. So there you have it, two of the most influential books of modern fly fishing. I'll stick to that until the day I die. So real pleasure having you here as always, Kelly.
Always.
Can't wait to, and I still say that the Zoo Cougar is, after all of this, one of my favorite flies of all time. I catch a lot of bass on that fly too.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it's two flies I don't leave home without, and that's the Cougar and the woolly sculp, and they're so old school, but they just catch fish.
I'd also go.
I could totally geek out and show you a picture of Joe Brooks in here in 1960 with a stack. Well, it's a blonde, and you're talking about yellow.
Yeah.
The reason is because of the picture of Joe holding that. He's got a 16-pound Chihuahuan chili brown. He's like this with. I love those old pictures.
Yeah, right.
The gill, right?
Right.
Giant yellow.
He wasn't keeping it wet.
Yeah, not so much. So he, but it, you know, he always said that the yellow stack or the yellow blonde was his. That was the go-to big fish fly.
Yeah. I believe
And
it.
that's the only reason I fished yellow.
I used to catch bass on that fly a lot too.
Yeah, that's still one of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, cool. There you have it, friends. You know how we are around here about books. I love books. I read books every day of my life. And that's the only reason I travel to destinations, because I get to fly and read a book while I'm on a plane. So Monor Streamers for Trophy Trout changed our industry. Monor Streamers for Trophy Trout too. You got to have this one too. So just get them both. I mean, I hope we answered your question there, but the answer is just get them both. So as always, it's a great pleasure to have Kelly here with us in Columbus, Ohio at Mad River Outfitters. You can also find us at the Slide Inn, usually there the last Sunday in July. Something like that.
August, yep.
Hang out through the first week of August or so. So you can find us hanging out at the Slide Inn. This will be our 21st year of hanging out at the Slide Inn. So anyhow, thanks as always for being here. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. It's free, and that way you won't ever miss an episode. And hit the like button. That just makes us feel good. So thanks for watching.
Don't forget.
Oh, yeah. You can say.
Huh? And get it right here. What is it?
Yeah,
you can see the video right here.
Yeah. And then there's one right there.
There's one right. That's your job.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Watch that one too.
Yeah.
Watch them all.